Welcome everybody around the world, and welcome to all my subscribers. This is a very important video here today, and what I'm going to essentially do is read through this line of verses that I have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I got let's say over 12 verses to read through here. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible so I don't take up a lot of time. But I'm going to go through the following verses that reveal that the end of days is in 2023. The evidence is so strong that it would really take an act of desperation to try and deny it once you hear it. There is no denying it, and if the Bible is real, then the end must be in 2023. This means that the rapture will be happening in 2023, and the evidence is just overwhelming. So I'm going to be going through the books, the prophecy of Daniel, in the book of Daniel. I'll be going through chapter 12 of the book of Revelation, but I've also got a cluster of other verses from Genesis, Psalms, Zechariah, Luke, Matthew, and a few more, and elsewhere in Revelation. So I got a lot to read. Like I said, over 12 verses, but I'm going to try to do this as quick as I can. So a lot of people, classically, Christians always tell me, they always say to everybody and each one another, that nobody will know when Jesus returns. And the only reason that any Christian would think or say such is because they have read the following verses. There's only a few of them in the entire Bible. In fact, they're only in 3 different books of the New Testament. Matthew says in chapter 24:36, concerning that day and the hour no one is known, not even the messengers of the heavens, except my Father only. Matthew again says just a couple verses later, essentially in verse 50, that the Lord of that servant will arrive in a day when he does not expect, and in an hour of which he does not know. And again in Matthew 25, same person, just a little bit later, says, watch therefore, for ye have not known the day or the hour in which the Son of Man does come. So essentially Matthew is stress this 3 times, but essentially it's one statement from one of the books from Matthew, right? Now, in Mark it says 13:32 in parallel, because we know the Gospels parallel each other. It says, concerning that day and the hour no one is known, not even the messengers who are in the heaven, not even the Son except the Father. And finally in Luke 12:46, it says basically the same thing, but I will read Luke 12 I will read a portion of Luke 12, not just 46, but a few other verses around it because it's quite revealing, but I'll get to it in its own time towards the end of the video. Or maybe I'll start off with it. So what we can see from those 3 verses in Matthew and the 1 verse in Mark so far, and the other one from Luke, you could argue, that all of these appear to say, that's 3, 4, 5 altogether, with 3 unique statements from 3 unique authors. Right? But who cares? It's 3 or 5. You have basically 5 statements saying you won't know the day or the hour. So I don't know why any Christian would take it a step further and say that you can't know the year. It's not even saying that I'm claiming to know the week or the month or the season, but just the year. It could happen any time during 2023. It could happen just before or just after. I would find that perfectly reasonable anyways. It wouldn't be a contradiction, I don't think, of anything. But it is not blasphemy or false prophecy to say that 2023 or any specific year would be the end, because the scripture nowhere says that you cannot know the year. Okay, it only says the day and the hour. I made a video on this the other day. I won't repeat the things I went through there, but it's a good chunk of video, at least half an hour, an hour long. And I read through all the verses on this topic. So that's a really good video. But anyways, this is where Christians get the idea, but it's a false idea, that you cannot know at all when Jesus is coming back. But that's simply not true. For starters, it doesn't say that. It just says the day or the hour. And secondly, when faced with all the evidence from Daniel and Revelation and everything else, we can quite clearly see that God did rub it in our faces and make it abundantly clear. Explicitly clear when the end would occur, what year it would be. So, without question. But before I do that, like I said, I want to read Luke 12, So I can close this window down. So let's go over to Luke 12. I'm going to read from verse 34, right? So this is, in a sense, in opposition to the mindset that the common Christian has, thinking that you can't know the year even that Jesus will come back based on the 5 verses I just read. Okay, so in Luke 12, which is one of the 5, verse 46 I think it was, I'm going to read from verse 34, and let's listen to a wider context of what Luke is talking about here, and understand that since the Gospels parallel each other, that Luke is therefore given more detail here in this sense, but also show that Mark and Matthew would likewise believe similar, or the same, and would have taught the same, right? Even though the Gospels parallel each other, each one's a little bit different. Some have more detail in certain areas than others, to each their own. So in verse 34 it says, "For where your treasure is, there also your heart will be. Let your loins be girded and the lamps burning. And ye like to men waiting for their Lord, when he shall return out of the wedding feast, that he having come and knocked, immediately they may open to him." Now I just want to interject right here. Again, I've got a video on this where I go through all the verses comprehensively that mention any type of thing like this, any use of these words or terms. And all I will say here is that Jesus repeatedly states and commands us to watch and be ready. And as I've classically always said, how can you watch for 2,000 years? How can you? Jesus didn't expect us to watch. Well, in a sense he did, but we don't live 2,000 years, each of us. We live up to 100 or whatever. He's not telling us to watch, whether collectively as humanity or individuals, to watch for 2,000 years, because it could come at any time. It's going to come at a specific time. And God did reveal to Daniel what the year would be. Okay? So if Jesus is saying to watch and be ready, that only makes sense if you could know, at least roughly, the year or years that Jesus would be coming back in. If you had some type of clue as to when he would be coming back, biblical, in basis, then you could literally and actually watch and be ready. However, otherwise, you couldn't do that. You would just be watching aimlessly, perpetually, for 2,000 years plus, because according to you, the end could come at any time, and nobody will know when it happens. There's no set point in such a person's mind. So, it says here, "And ye like to men waiting for their Lord, when he shall return out of the wedding feast, that he, having come and knocked, immediately they may open to him. Happy those servants," let me just turn this a little bit. "Happy those servants whom the Lord, having come, shall find watching. Verily I say to you, that he will gird himself, and will cause them to recline at meat, and having come near, will minister to them." So he's literally said here that when Jesus arrives, we know he arrives suddenly, that he really wants people to be immediately ready, like ready and watching for his imminent arrival, so that they can immediately open up and let him in, essentially. Okay? And he says right here in verse 37, "Happy those servants whom the Lord, having come, shall find watching." Right? You can't watch for 2,000 years. "But verily I say to you, that he will gird himself, and will cause them to recline and meat, and having come near, will minister to them." But it gets to something important, so bear with me. Verse 38, "And if he may come in the second watch, and in the third watch he may come, and may find it so, happy are those servants. And this know, that if the master of the house," referencing Satan, "had known what hour the thief represents Jesus here, if the master of the house had known what hour the thief does come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken through." So the fact that this is telling you that if you could watch and know when Jesus would be, at least roughly arriving, that's what it tells you right there. The inverse of what it says, it shows you the logically true inverse as well. Because it says right here, if the master of the house had known what hour the thief does come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken through. So that implies logically that, he couldn't anyways, right? And it says, "And ye then become ye ready, because at the hour," I'm not a professional speaker, right? So in verse 40, "And ye then become ye ready, because at the hour ye think not the Son of Man does come." Fine. It's already established you won't know the day or the hour. That's all good, right? In verse 41, "And Peter said to him, Sir, unto us this simile does thou speak, or unto all?" like old people. And the Lord said, Who then is the faithful and prudent steward, who the Lord shall set over his household to give in season the wheat measure? Happy that servant, whom his Lord, having come, shall find doing so. Truly I say to you, that over all his goods he will set him. And if that servant may say in his heart, My Lord does delay to come, meaning you have no clue when he's coming, you don't think he's coming back soon, you just think, he keeps delaying to come, right? He says, may begin to beat the men servants and the maid servants, to eat also and to drink and to be drunken, meaning if you're thinking Jesus isn't coming back anytime soon and you're off there doing sins, whether you're a Christian or not, what does it say will happen? It says in the next verse, the Lord of that servant will come in a day which he does not look for him, and in an hour that he does not know, and will cut him off, and his portion with the unfaithful he will appoint. However, in that servant, verse 47, who having known his Lord's will, in that servant who having known his Lord's will, and not having prepared, nor having gone according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. And he who not having known, and having done things worthy of stripes, meaning like non-Christians, non-believers, who did the same level of bad things as the Christians did, shall be beaten with lesser stripes than the Christians will be, because the Christians knew better and they still did it. And to everyone whom much was given, much shall be required of him. So the important thing is, it's so easy to breeze over. Jesus essentially says that if you know when I'm coming and you're watching and you're ready, able to immediately let me in when I come like lightning, then you have a place with me. But if you're sitting there saying in your heart that my Lord delays to come and you're off there doing sins or whatever, then he will arrive at a day and hour you do not know. That's the important part. That's what it says. Right? And like I said, the Gospels all parallel each other. Matthew and Mark knew the same thing Luke was saying here. Luke is saying that you won't know the day or hour, okay, because you're not watching, you're not ready. It implies that you are able to know at least a year when Jesus will come. It actually even strongly suggests that you could actually know the day or the hour if you were that wise. Okay, Satan isn't that wise. He wasn't able to know the day or hour. If he had, he would have been able to prepare. But Jesus says, those who aren't ready, who say that I'm delaying to come, I will come at a day and hour that they do not know. Where is that verse again? I lost the place here. Right there in verse 46. The Lord of that servant will come in a day in which he does not look for him, and in an hour that he does not know. So if you take the logical inverse of that, it's saying that if you are watching, if you are ready, if you are wise, if you are righteous, Jesus will come on time. Because you know when to watch and expect him to arrive. So the logical inverse is, if you're not ready, watching, wise, and ready and all of that, then you won't know the day or hour, and you'll be caught by surprise. That's why Jesus compares himself to a thief. And look at this in Revelation, where is it? I had this open here. Yeah, Revelation 3:3. Jesus says, as a warning to the churches, he says, remember then how thou was received and heard, and be keeping and reform. If then thou mayest not watch, I will come upon thee as a thief, and thou mayest not know what hour I will come upon thee. So again, if you take the logical inverse, what Jesus says is, if you are watching, you'll be ready. You'll know when to expect me. So he actually says this. It's in Luke 12 and in Revelation 3. Right? He's warning the church to reform. If then thou mayest not watch for his arrival, he will come like a thief. Okay, so if you're in there saying in your heart, oh, my Lord delays to come, we don't know when he's coming back. You know, it's been 2,000 years, nobody knows when. Like, that type of person is giving off the impression that there's no time, there's no date when Jesus is returning. That takes away all hope from people. Knowing that there will be a date and that there is a date gives people hope. And when you're out there for 2,000 years teaching people arrogantly that you can't know when Jesus is coming back, at least even the year, then what you're doing is robbing people of that hope. You're making Jesus seem like a failure because for 2,000 years he could have showed up, but he didn't show up, when the world increasingly needs it more and more. However, knowing wisely that there was and always it has been a set time, year, time, day and hour, and everything when he would arrive, regardless of who's aware of that, knowing that gives people hope. Okay, and saying that it's a variable X, you won't know. It might be in 1,000 years. When you have that mindset where you can't know when it is and there's no set time, you're taking away people's hope. That's what you have to understand. And that's why Jesus says, if you're wise and you're ready, you'll be watching for my arrival. If you're not ready, wise, and watching, then I'll catch you by surprise like a thief. I'll come in the night and you won't know when I'm coming. I'll catch you by surprise. So it's very easy. And look, Revelation 16:15 says the same thing, essentially, sorry. Lo, I do come as a thief. Happy is he who is watching and keeping his garments, that he may not walk naked, and they may see his unseemliness. What this is saying is, if you're watching and you know when he's about to arrive, you're going to be fully dressed. You're not going to be caught by surprise and be brought to shame. But those who aren't ready, even if they are Christians, mean well and everything, but they're not ready, they're not watching, they're not being wise, they're going to be caught by surprise. And if you're caught by surprise, it's like Jesus is a thief. A thief comes by surprise, right? But if Jesus is coming like, the bridegroom from the wedding feast, and you know when he's going to come out of the wedding feast, like he just said earlier in that other verse, then you will be ready to immediately let him in when he knocks on the door. You'll be ready. You'll be watching. So it's undeniable that the Bible says these things. But at the end of the day, nobody could argue that you cannot at least know the year. So where can we get the idea of what year he will be returning? Okay, we can start off here in Daniel 12. In the prior chapters of Daniel, he's been shown all these things are going to happen to Israel. Essentially, Israel's going to fall. But not just fall, it's going to be conquered. Okay, we all know Judaism and Christianity all accept it was Rome that Daniel was talking about in chapter 9 that would overtake Israel and overthrow it. We know from history that it was Rome. Okay, so it talks about Israel will fall, it will be conquered, and that Israel will go desolate. And it also says that an abomination would be built on the Temple Mount. Okay, so for 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have all thought that it was Antiochus who built a statue of Zeus, put it in the temple, and forced people to sacrifice pigs, which is an abomination of Jewish law. It's overlooking the fact that in Roman and Greek society, pigs were the most common sacrifice for poor people because that's the only creature that they could afford. Similar in Judaism with doves. If you couldn't afford the other animals, the poorest of people could bring 2 doves. Just different culture, different animals, whatever. Well, a lot of people don't know that. That's an interesting fact. It's not like he may have been purposely doing it to antagonize the Jews, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't something unprecedented in their own culture to start with, right? That's my point. But was Antiochus, whatever, if his statue of Zeus, was that really the abomination? Right? I'm going to read through the verses where Daniel talks about the abomination. I just did a double check before I started this video. I searched for the word abominate, abominating, abomination, and all of that, all the forms of abomination, abominate, just to make sure that I wasn't missing a verse, just to make absolutely sure that I am correct. So the verse I'm going to go through here talk about the abomination of desolation. And what you'll clearly see, it couldn't have been Antiochus. It couldn't have been Antiochus because of the time frame that's laid out here. And when you see the evidence that I'll present for what the abomination was, this statue of Antiochus will look like chicken scratch compared to it. There's absolutely no doubt what the abomination of desolation was on the Temple Mount historically, but I'll get to that. So Daniel has just been shown all these things in the prior chapters. Chapter 12 is the final chapter, and in chapter 12, at the end of all those visions of the horrific things, it's all wrapping up. It's like the credit screen is rolling, and Daniel turns around to the angels, and the angels say to him in verse 4, "And thou, O Daniel, hide the things and seal the book till the time of the end." Well, if this is the end days, then it's about time for it to be spread, right? Like he said. But, "And seal the book till the time of the end. Many do go to and fro, and knowledge is multiplied." Right? So that means in the days of the end, people will understand the numbers and everything that God has given Daniel in these verses I'm about to read, and the knowledge will be multiplied in the time of the end. It won't be hidden, and it's not that nobody will know. God gave us the numbers, right? It's right here. Daniel asked for numbers, and God gave him numbers. Daniel asked how long until the end. God verbatim told him how long until the end. There's no arguing, right? So the knowledge will be multiplied. In verse 5, "And I have looked, I Daniel, and lo, 2 others are standing, one here at the edge of the flood, and one there at the edge of the flood." And he said to the one clothed in linen who is upon the waters of the flood, till when is the end of these wonders? So what is these wonders? It's all the things that Daniel has just shown. All these terrible things through all the chapters that will befall Israel. Okay, until when is the end of these wonders? And I heard the one clothed in linen who is upon the waters of the flood, and he does lift up his right hand and his left unto the heavens, and sweareth by him who is living to the age, that after a time, times and a half, that's 3.5 times, and at the completion of the scattering of the power of the holy people, the Jews and the Christians, finished are all these. Okay? But Daniel has an inclination that that's not the very end. That's the end of those wonders, but it's not the end of days. So Daniel says in verse 8, and I have heard, and I do not understand. And I say, O my Lord, what is the latter end of these? And he saith, Go, Daniel, for hidden and sealed are the things until the time of the end. Purify themselves, yea, make themselves white, yea, refined are many, and the wicked have done wickedly, and none of the wicked understand. And those acting wisely do understand. Understand what, pray tell, dear God? Oh, that's right, the numbers he's about to give us to calculate the end days. Let me just read that again, right? The wicked have done wickedly, and none of the wicked understand. Understand what, right? And those acting wisely do understand. Understand what? Well, it tells you. And from the time of the turning aside of the perpetual sacrifice, which occurred at the hands of Babylon in 602 BC, okay? And from the time of the turning aside of the perpetual sacrifice into the giving out of the desolating abomination are days 1,290. Now in Ezekiel chapter 4, which I don't have to read here, I don't have ready to read, forgot to bring it up, but in Ezekiel chapter 4, God tells Ezekiel, I want you to lay on your right side and then your left side for a certain period of days on each side, and it's a day for a year. And God repeats it like 2 or 3 times, a day for a year, a day for a year. Okay, so we know that God does this with units of time in prophecy. Okay, and God verbatim says a day for a year. Now we know also from Daniel 9, I think like verse 2, Daniel's thinking about the 70 weeks of Jeremiah, and God tells him through the angels that it's actually 70 weeks of years. So we know that God does this. It's evidenced in Ezekiel, it's evidenced in Daniel. So we ask ourselves, is this 1,290 days, which people try to apply to Antiochus or to Babylon in conflated ways, or is it 1,290 years? We have every reason and right to believe it could be 1,290 years. Now guess what? From 602 BC, when Babylon historically did take away the perpetual sacrifice, they ransacked the temple, took away the implements and everything. When they did that, it was precisely 1,290 years until the year 688 AD, also known as CE nowadays, which is the year that the nation of Islam, the kingdom of Islam, which was the fourth and final beast kingdom, which I'll prove here, right? That's when Islam built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. Okay, so hold on, I have to go back here. Alright, no, I'll just do that. Okay, so they built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. I'll get to that with later verses as I read more of these verses here. Okay, so, but more importantly, the numbers here right now. This is the first verse. Bear with me, I got more to read, right? So 1,290 days or years. Now, with 1,290 years taken from when the sacrifice was taken away historically by Babylon, in 602, we will come to 688. So one should logically expect, okay, well, if the Bible's real and the prophecy is real, then we should expect to see something precisely in the year 688 AD. And if we look in history, what do we see? Oh yeah, we see that Islam built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount after conquering and invading Israel and all the surrounding, basically most of the known world. Okay, so that does fit there. If you try to say it was 1,290 days, I mean, come on. What ancient Roman calendar do you have where you could pinpoint something down to 1,290 days? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, right? I mean, people have waffled on picking straws for 2,000 years over that, right? But it fits perfectly with the 1,290 years. And bear with me, because all the other verses further prove this. But in verse 13, the final verse in the book of Daniel, he says, and thou go on to the end. I skipped one. In verse 12, oh, the blessedness of him who is waiting earnestly and does come to the days 1,330 and thou go on to the end, and thou dost rest and dost stand in thy lot at the end of the days. So here God is actually saying the end of the days. I mean, the end of days. That's only mentioned a few times in the Bible. Trust me, it's rare, because I've done searches for this on Bible Gateway in the original translation, which is the only translation I use. I should say that at the beginning of every video, because people go look in their Bibles and see something else written, because they're looking at some perverted, altered translation. So, God has literally told Daniel here, not basically, he's literally told Daniel there'll be 1335 until the end of days. Now, another reason you know that it's not 1290 days is because God says at the 1335th day would be the end. We know that with Antiochus or whoever else it might have been way back in the time back then, like 2,000 years ago, we know that the end of days wasn't 2,000 years ago. What are we, in the Twilight Zone? No, it has to be years. So that's another logical reason why it's 1,290 years. Okay? So that would mean verse 12 and 13 shows you that 1335th year would be the end of days. Now, applying that to from 602 BC to 688 AD, adding on the final 75 years, which is required to take it from the 1290 to the 1335, sorry, no, not from the 1290. The 75 is taken from the 1260 onwards. That's from the 3.5. Bear with me 1 second. When you do the math, it comes to 2023, right? So let's go back to verse 7 where he said 3.5 times. Now 3.5 times is 1260 days. We apply the Ezekiel 4 reasoning again. Here's the days or years, right? Long story short, not years, sorry. Are the units days or years? So is it 3.5 times? Is 3.5 times 1260 days, or is it 1260 years? That's what I was trying to get out of my mouth and I couldn't say it. Okay, so it's either 1260 days or 1260 years. Okay, we can see here a pattern. We got 1260, we got 1290, we got 1335. Now, some very narrow-minded people have gone out there and added all three numbers together. I mean, that's just ridiculous. He's talking about one span of time. 1335, it marks the end. God told us that. Okay, numbers start from 0. So it goes from 0 to 1335. Okay, well, where do you take the 0 from? Where do you mark that measure? Right? Well, that's why Daniel asked the angels, till when is the end of these wonders? Right? So once Israel had fallen, once it had been conquered, which occurred in 70 AD, once the Jews and Christians had finished scattering and going into exile, which took hundreds of years until 600 or so AD. I mean, they were still there when Islam came and conquered in the 600s. Okay, only when the completion of the scattering of the holy people had been completed, and only when the final condition, which was the abomination, was built on the Temple Mount, which occurred 688 AD with the Dome of the Rock, only then would the measure of 3.5 times be measured. Okay, so you take the 3.5 times, 1260 years, from 688 AD, and you precisely come to 1948 AD, which is the year that Israel was reborn. Okay, the Jews and Christians fought to get Israel back from the Empire of Islam. They won the battle, and they won the right to occupy Israel again. So it was the rebirth of Israel in 1948, precisely 1260 years. Now we see from 602 BC to 688 AD, we had that one prophecy, the 1290 years fulfilled. Then we see from 688, the same pivot point, 688 AD, all the way up until 1948, which has a historical verification to it, the rebirth of Israel, from the hands of the very rulers, Islam, that we're talking about here, precisely 1260. So we can see that the numbers fit perfectly with history and with Daniel. Okay, and nobody else has come up with anything else. There's no other theory, okay, out there that people come up with. Antiochus, Nero, anybody that people could think of, Caesars and this and that there, none of them fit, and none of them fit so perfectly. This is it, okay? So if Daniel told us that the 13th and 35th would mark the end, that's another 75 years from 1260. You have 40 to bring it to 1300, and then 35. 40 plus 35 is 75. So it'll be an additional and final 75 years, which is basically a generation, until the end, which will be 2023. So God not verbatim, but God basically, I can't think of the right word, but he inadvertently and indirectly revealed to us that 2023 will be the end. Now, nobody back in Jesus' day, or for another 500 or 600 years, would have had any clue about the Empire of Islam, and the Dome of the Rock didn't stand on the Temple Mount until 688. So nobody until 688 could even have a comprehension of, oh, this is the abomination. And trust me, if you go back in historical records, a lot of people around the world who knew about these things considered the Dome of the Rock as the abomination of desolation. Okay? It's not just a few crazy people nowadays. That was a classic belief throughout the ages. Okay? Especially if you lived in the region at the time, or if you lived in Israel and it gets conquered by Islam, they smash away the remnants of the temple and build the Dome of the Rock on top, start worshiping a foreign and unknown, essentially alien god, in direct opposition to the Bible, rewrite the Bible. You got the Quran, change all the laws, change the hierarchy of prophets is all usurped by their founding prophet, yada yada. So a final 75 years has a strong parallel over to the following, right? If we go over to Genesis here, and God says to Abraham, Genesis 12 verse 1, okay, you have to understand on the AC calendar, which is after creation, taking the creation of Adam as year 0, there are precisely, and this is not my bad calculation, this is what any scholar will tell you, it's a fact, okay? Abraham was born 1948 years after Adam's creation, so 1948 AC. Now the AC calendar has absolutely no relevance to the Gregorian calendar, which we all use. It bears no relevance or connection to the Gregorian at all. There is none. No mathematical connection. They're completely unrelated. Gregorian calendar pivots around a year 0, goes infinitely into BC, infinitely into AD. The AC calendar is a completely different scenario. AC calendar starts from a point being cold 0 and goes infinitely forwards, and that's it. Okay, so two completely unrelated calendars, but we get 1948, the birth of Abraham. Israel came from Abraham, right? He's the forefather of Israel. The birth of Abraham, okay? The one who got the promise for all the nations in the world and for Israel, right? And 1948, the birth of Israel. 1948 AD. Coincidence, right? But not only that, if you search the Bible for the number 75, 75 years, Genesis 12:1, and God said to Abraham, Go for thyself from thy land and from thy kindred and from the house of thy father unto the land which I show thee, and I make thee become a great nation. Israel, what do you know? And bless thee and make thy name great, and be thou a blessing. And I bless those blessing thee, and him who is esteeming thee I curse, and blessing in thee have been all the families of the ground. And Abraham goeth on as Hashem has spoken unto him, and Lot goeth with him. And Abraham is a son of 75 years, and is going out from Haran. So they left her. They were called by God to leave the land of idolatry and to enter the promised land 75 years after 1948, which would come to 2023. So it was the year 2023 AC when God called out to Abraham and told him to come out of Babylon and to go into the promised land. That is an extremely important time period, and the number is 2023. Now, if you apply that, if 2023 AD is the end days that God warned us about, that is a perfect parallel. You have the birth of Israel in parallel to the birth of Abraham. 75 years later, one generation, we have, Abraham's blessing went to all Israel and all the nations of the earth. So, in parallel, in 2023 AD, all the nations of the earth and, the sea and Israel and everybody, this is when we will have the choice and be called out by God to leave the world of idolatry and to enter the true promised land, the new world. Beautiful, perfect parallel on completely unrelated calendars. That cannot be a mere coincidence, okay? Especially considering that God has provided the numbers, and history provided the events. It's not my invention. This is combining what God said the numbers are and combining with history, and everything lines up. Now, in Psalm 90, it says here in verse 9, For all our days pined away in thy wrath, we consumed our years as a meditation. Days of our years, in them are 70 years, and if by reason of might 80 years. Yet is there enlargement, labor, and vanity, for it has been cut off hastily, and we fly away. So it's actually saying that to go over 70 towards 80 is vanity, okay? Where is it? Days of our years, in them are 70, and if by reason of might, 80 years. Yet is there enlargement towards the 80, labor and vanity, for it has been cut off hastily, and we fly away. So we know that it's more than 70, but it's less than 80. 75 is perfectly in between. It says, for it has been cut off. Cut off would signify chopping. So it's fair to say, this is actually a very strong hint that at the 75th year, just like with Abraham, we will be cut off hastily, and we will fly away, signifying the rapture. And that's one of the only, if not the only, occurrence of that terminology, flying away like that. It's a very mysterious use of the word, fly away. The Jews in Judaism never believed in a rapture. Only Christians believed in that. But it actually says, and we fly away. So if you apply Psalm 90 over to what I'm talking about, it aligns with it beautifully as well. And we can also go to Zechariah 1. And Zechariah is having a vision, and he sees the 4 horsemen. In verse 8, I have seen by night, and lo, one riding on a red horse, and he is standing between the myrtles that are in the shade, and behind him are horses, red, bay, and white. And I say, what are these, my Lord? And the messenger who is speaking with me saith unto me, I do show thee what these are. And the one who is standing between the myrtles does answer and say, these are they whom God has sent to walk up and down in the land. And they answer the messenger of God who is standing between the myrtles and say, we have walked up and down in the land, and lo, all the land is sitting still and at rest. And the messenger of God answereth and saith, God of hosts, till when dost thou not pity Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that thou hast abhorred these 70 years? Now, if you go on to read, I don't have time to do this. I made a video about this and had a lot of people agree with me. People from Judaism and in Christianity, because it's true. God is actually talking about the end days here. This is not talking about ancient Israel. You have to understand, Israel, Jerusalem, everything's been desolate for 2,000 years. Okay? This is talking about Israel and Jerusalem. Israel was reborn in 1948. That would be the final generation being spoken about here. Okay? And he says, so when Jerusalem and Israel was in power, God loved them, right? And it says here in verse 12, and the messenger of God answereth and saith, God of hosts, till when dost thou not pity Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that thou hast abhorred these 70 years? Right? So that's another strong hint that at the end of the 70 or 75 years, that will be lifted. The abhorrence will be lifted. It will come to a culmination point. Okay? Now, in Matthew 24:15, Jesus references, and in Mark 13:14 in parallel, Jesus references the abomination of desolation that I'm claiming is the Dome of the Rock. He says, whenever therefore ye may see the abomination of the desolation that was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever is reading, let him observe. And then he goes, I don't have time to read it, but he goes on to say, flee to the mountains. And well, I might as well open up one and read it. So that's verse 15. That was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, the Temple Mount. Whoever is reading him, let him observe. I even searched the Tanakh in the Bible for holy place, and it is the Temple Mount. Okay? Nobody can say it's something else. No, Jesus specifically referenced that the abomination would be something built on the Temple Mount. Okay? In twofold, in Matthew and the other book. Right? So, standing in the holy place, whoever is reading, let him observe. Then those in Judea, let them flee to the mountains. Now, when Islam invaded Israel, the people did flee to the mountains. It historically took place, right? He on the housetop, let him not come down to take up anything out of his house. And there's other ones where it talks about when you see Israel surrounded by encampments. This is what happened when Islam invaded Israel. So let's go back. I don't want to have to read too much more, make this video super long. So Jesus, the most important thing is Jesus said the abomination would stand on the Temple Mount. And it would be at a time of invasion, okay, when Israel was being conquered, obviously by a foreign nation and peoples. In Mark 13:14, same thing. And when you may see the abomination of the desolation that was spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, whoever is reading, let him understand. Then those in Judea, let them flee to the mountains. So the abomination is something that's built on the Temple Mount. Right? And Daniel was told 3.5 times after the fall of Israel, the conquering of Israel, the desolation of Israel, and the abomination on the Temple Mount. And after the scattering of the completion of the scattering of the holy people. Well, all of these things were fulfilled in 688 when the abomination was built on the Temple Mount. Before 688, all of those things have been fulfilled except for the abomination being built on the Temple Mount. Okay? When Antiochus ruled, there were still a lot of Jews and Christians in Israel. The scattering hadn't been completed yet. Even though Israel had fallen and been conquered by the Romans, it hadn't fallen and been conquered by the final beast kingdom, because Rome is not the final beast kingdom. Okay? So furthermore, like I said, the 1260 years fits perfectly from 688 to 1948, right? Till when is the end of these wonders? So I can close down Daniel chapter 12. Next we go to Daniel chapter 7. He says here in verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast, which I'm saying is Islam, is the fourth kingdom in the earth that is diverse, meaning unlike all kingdoms, and it consumeth all the earth, and it treadeth it down and breaketh it small. Now let's go look at some basic facts here. Islam was a brand new religion, new language created by their founder, new religion. They rewrote the Bible, called it the Quran, new set of laws. Everything was new, new kingdom, everything. All brand new, a new God, new deity nobody had heard of before. Diverse from all kingdoms. And Daniel says in two or three other places that the fourth beast kingdom is unlike all of the other beast kingdoms. But here it actually says diverse from all kingdoms. So in either sense, it's true of Islam. It was a brand new religion, brand new deity. All of that was brand new, right? More importantly, Rome, the religion of Rome, the culture of Rome, the architecture, everything of Rome was a carbon copy of Greece. Okay? Whoever copied who first doesn't matter. It was a carbon copy, photocopy of Greece. Okay? They literally had the same, virtually everything, just with Romanized or Greek names. Everything was the same. Zeus was Jupiter. Okay? All of those gods, they were all the same. The religion was the same, everything. So Rome was just like Greece. But Daniel says in 3 or 4 places that the fourth beast is not like the other beast kingdoms or any other kingdom. So it cannot be Rome, just in that one point. But I've got other videos where I give other proof. Jesus says in Revelation that it's Jesus speaking to John. Jesus says that the 10 horns of the beast kingdom have not received the kingdom yet. Rome was standing in Jesus' day. It was standing hundreds of years, thousands of years before Jesus. But Rome is the one that put Jesus to death. But Jesus here is saying to John that the 10 horns of the beast kingdom, they haven't received their kingdom yet. So Rome was not the fourth beast kingdom. That's just a snippet of proof, right? So he says the fourth beast is the fourth kingdom in the earth that's diverse. It's not like any other kingdom. It consumeth all the earth, treadeth it down, and breaketh it small. Now, the empire of Islam was 5 or 10 times as large as Rome's. It was bigger than any other empire back then. Okay? So again, true of Islam. And it says the 10 horns out of the kingdom are 10 kings. Now, these 10 horns are mentioned lots of times by Daniel. They're mentioned lots of times in the book of Revelation. What's so important about 10 horns? 10 horns, 10 horns. I mean, even in Rome, they had hundreds and thousands of different rulers of different hierarchies and levels. Kings, emperors, senators, this, that, and the other. Tons and tons and tons. Even in Babylon, the same thing. You know, satraps and whatever they're called, and different forms of rulers. So everybody's cherry picking. Oh, I think it's this guy. I think it's that guy. But in Islam, you had 10 initial caliphs. The 10th caliph built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. Now, that would make perfect sense why 10 kings are always mentioned, because the 10th king would build the abomination on the Temple Mount. That would make perfect sense and be a very good reason why 10 kings are stressed so much, right? So here we go, Daniel 7. It says, in the 10 horns out of the kingdom are 10 kings. And remember, Jesus said these 10 horns hadn't received the kingdom yet in the time of Rome. So what great kingdom came after Rome? Was it Genghis Khan? Nope. Nothing else compares to the empire of Islam. It had to be Islam. And Islam specifically conquered and opposed Judaism, Christianity, took over the Holy Land, rewrote the holy books. Okay? Enslaved and beheaded and put the people to death, exiled them, everything you could think of. Put taxes on them. So anyways, and the 10 horns of the kingdom are 10 kings. They rise and another does rise after them, who would be the 11th caliph. And it is diverse from the former and 3 kings it humbleth. And may it be a coincidence or not, but 3 of the prior caliphs, prior to the 11th, were assassinated. Whether that's a coincidence or not, I don't know. Figured I'd mention it. Now, in words as an adversary of the Most High, this is the 11th one, it does speak, and the saints of the Most High it does wear out, and it hopeth to change seasons and law, everything Islam did, and they are given into, historically, any scholar would tell you that Islam, especially religious scholar from Judaism, they would tell you that Islam tampered with the seasons and law. So it hopeth to change seasons and law, and they are given into its hand. How long, it says? Till a time, times, and a division of times. 3.5 times. So again, that's 1260 years, as discussed before. So 1260 years, we got the 10th king, and then after the 10th, we got the period that Daniel mentioned in chapter 12. He actually said this one first, but this corroborates what I said about chapter 12. Okay, the 10th king of Islam, the 10th ruler of Islam, who was the 9th caliph after their founding prophet, who was the first ruler, obviously. You build the Dome of the Rock, you take the measure of 1260 after that, boom, you come to 1948, the rebirth of Israel, the end of those wonders. Then you got the final 75-year generation until the end, which is 2023. Okay? So, and it's given into his hand until 3.5 times. And the judge is seated, and its dominion they cause to pass away, to cut off, and to destroy unto the end. So, we know from earlier on in Daniel, like chapter 4, I think it is, he talks about the statue, the great statue that was seen. And it says that the final kingdom, which was the legs and everything, the one of iron, that it would then fizzle away and just become mixed in with the other kingdoms. So we could see Islam did do this. They once had that global empire. It fizzled away a couple hundred years ago or whatever. They even lost their hold in Israel, but now they're intermingled with every people and culture and religion around the world. That whole, well, so is pretty much everybody, but it still holds true to what Daniel said. They went from being a global empire to being, mixed in with everybody else. Kind of similar to Israel, it had its own empire, although it wasn't global, and then they got mixed in with everybody else. Okay, so up until the very end, when the Messiah would arrive. Okay, so Daniel 7 and Daniel 12 both specifically talk about a time period of 3.5 times, which logically must be 1260 years. Okay? Now, furthermore, we can see confirmation that it must have been Islam that did this, and just further corroboration of everything. If we go to Daniel 11, he is just described, to save some time, I won't read from the start of the chapter, skip 20 verses. It literally verbatim says and talks about the fall of Grecia. Okay, Grecia was the third beast kingdom. I believe that Grecia fell, and it was then what we regard as the Roman kingdom. That was just, they both existed at the same time prior to their status as a beast kingdom. But after Grecia fell, what remained? It would be Rome. Rome was basically a carbon copy of Grecia, so I just view it as the Greco-Roman kingdom. They both had their peak moments where they got to show face stronger. But anyways, it talks about the fall of Grecia, how it splits into 4 kingdoms, and then it describes over very many verses all this in-depth discussion over kings falling and rising and kingdom passing to kingdom. And a lot of people breeze over that material because it's very confusing and nobody can make sense of it. I even have Bibles where the commentary says, you're basically grasping for straws trying to figure out who this is talking about. It's because nobody considers Islam. Some people have, right? But basically nobody does. Now, I did some study and found out that where we're talking about here in verse 18, I believe in verse 19 is the introduction of the founding prophet of Islam. And it literally, everything it describes from verse 19 to the end of the chapter basically details what he did in his life. It is a perfect fulfillment, and I think this is absolute perfect corroboration, backing up and connecting everything else together that I've claimed. And you'll be astonished at a few of the verses actually, right? But in order for that belief of mine to be true, right, I would have to verify it. So tracking back further, I would have to see where it connects over after the fall of Grecia. We know that Grecia fell like 145 BC or whatever it was. We know that Rome itself fell in like 200 or 300 AD and was actually won over by the Christian Empire, the Catholic Empire anyways, but still the Christian Empire. And, it was still Rome, but it had been Christianized, right? No longer the great evil, Roman pagan empire. Anyways, there are a lot of changes of kingdoms over this time. So I had to look back before the founding prophet of Islam. How did he gain his foothold in his kingdom? So I read up the history, and there we go. When you compare it to what Daniel says in chapter 11 of the figure that I believe is talking about this one, it perfectly lines up. And you'll see what I mean, because I'm going to read it. Okay? Now, so it talked, like I said, this chapter talks about a lot of kings after Grecia rising and falling. A lot of them. It gets very, very confusing and obscure. In verse 19, I'll just jump in. It says, "And he turneth," some unknown king, whoever it might be at this moment, "he turneth back his face to the strongholds of his land, and has stumbled and fallen, and is not found. It stood upon his station." This is the key term that I had to research. What kingdom did the founding prophet of Islam initially occupy, right? So, and stood upon his station, this is identifying a kingdom, has won, causing an exactor to pass over the honor of the kingdom, and in a few days he is destroyed, and not in anger nor in battle. So when I looked up, I found I can't remember their names anymore, I don't have it up here, but there was somebody who was acting as an exactor of kingdoms, and all of this came true. Okay, so the kingdom was being handed over. Greece had fallen, Rome had fallen, you had all these other different kingdoms that ruled in between, kings rising and falling. It's all fussing over a certain lot of land, a certain empire, a station, a kingdom, right? An exactor is the one who hands over a kingdom in these political moments, right? So it says here, and stood upon the station as one causing exactor to pass over the honor of the kingdom, and in a few days he is destroyed, not in anger nor in battle. This actually happened with that exactor. He was killed by accident, I think by a friend, one of his good friends, with a spear. It was at a great banquet or celebration. He was accidentally killed by a spear. So someone acting as an exactor who actually did pass over the honor of the kingdom onto who would become and was the founding prophet of Islam, who founded his empire upon this station. That exactor did die. Okay, like it says, he is destroyed and not in anger nor in battle. He was killed by friendly accidental fire at a moment of celebration. Okay, and it says here that, this is the exactor. He's just handed over the station, the kingdom, to who? To what? It says in verse 21, the introduction of the founding prophet of Islam, and stood upon his station as a despicable one. This is the great false prophet that Revelation warned about, the lamb-like beast who forced the known world to worship the fourth beast kingdom, which was Islam. So it stood upon his station as a despicable one, and they have not given unto him the honor of the kingdom. Because, if you research the history of the founding prophet, nobody believed him in the beginning. He could only get a few of his relatives and best friends to believe. And they had to win over people with flatteries, and him writing a whole new language and claiming to have divine inspiration and this divine vision, and claiming to have risen up through all the heavens to stand before the throne of God to be told that he was better than Jesus and greater of a prophet than Jesus was. And he was told by his God, Allah, that Jesus never died on the cross, that Jesus never resurrected. He was told by Allah that the Holy Spirit and the baptism are lies. And he was told by Allah that Jesus is not the Son of God. He was told all the things that define one as an antichrist, as Jesus himself said. This was the religion given by the false God unto this founding prophet. Okay? And he had a hard time convincing people of all this stuff. But everything that's said here is true of the prophet. It says right here, he is coming quietly and has strengthened the kingdom by flatteries. And the arms of the flood, which Daniel mentioned in chapter 9, is actually a reference to Rome. Rome will come in like a flood and take over Israel, 70 AD. So the arms of the flood, meaning Rome, are overflowed from before him and are broken, and also the leader of the covenant. This is true. Some of the first armies that they attacked and won over in battle were the Roman legions and such, right? And the Christians and the Jews and others. So the arms of the flood are overflowed from before him and are broken, and also the leader of the covenant. And after they join themselves unto him, there are many converts to Islam. He worketh deceit and is increased. Now a lot of Christians don't know, but the prophet was said to have done many miracles, including when he gave his versions of the sacrifice to Allah. Supposedly Allah, who they claim is God, sent down heavenly fire to confirm the sacrifice, which is how with Moses it was confirmed and he was confirmed. These are very powerful demonic deceptions, and Revelation warns us that the false prophet, the lamb-like beast, would do exactly that. Okay? The prophet of Islam is also said to produce food magically for people, for multitudes, just like Jesus. A lot of things very similar to Jesus. A lamb-like beast, preaching about Jesus, but that essentially an antichrist version of Jesus. That's the Islamic version of Jesus. Islam actually teaches in many circles, or if not in the Quran itself, that there's a lot, let me rephrase that. In many circles in Islam, they teach that when Jesus returns to the earth, he will behead all the Christians. I'm not joking here. Okay? So they join themselves unto him. He worketh deceit and has increased, and has been strong by a few of the nation. That's true. Peaceably, even unto the fertile places of the province, meaning Israel, he cometh, and he has done that which his fathers did not, nor his fathers' fathers. His forefathers, his tribesfolk, were just common tribesfolk. They had their own Babylonian-style religion. They didn't want to have any part in this. He only got a few friends and relatives initially, and it only grew as the influence grew, as they won battles and got loot from their battles and this and that there, and accumulated wealth and power. That's when they gained more influence and convinced more people, and with the flowery, flattering talk in their alleged visions and verses from Allah. Okay, so unto the fertile. So he's starting to make his way towards Israel now, right? And he has done that which his fathers did not, nor his fathers' fathers. Prey and spoil and substance to them he scattereth. And against fenced places he deviseth his devices even for a time. And he stirreth up his power in his heart against the king of the south. Okay, so I could skip some of this, otherwise we'll be here together. So in verse 28, and he turneth back to his land with great substance, and his heart is great against the holy covenant. 100% true of Islam. They rewrote the Bible. And he has wrought and has turned back to his land. In the appointed time he turneth back and has come against the south, and it is not as the former and as the latter. And ships of Kittim, which is from Europe, have come in against him. This could very well be the Crusaders, and this and that there, or earlier versions of the Crusades. It's quite astonishing to see this. And ships of Kittim have come in against him, and he has been pained and has turned back and has been insolent towards the holy covenant, and has wrought and turned back, and he understandeth concerning those forsaking the holy covenant. Now check this in verse 31. This confirms it all. And strong ones out of him stand up. Who would these strong ones be? The 10 kings, the subsequent 9 kings. And strong ones out of him stand up, and have polluted the sanctuary, the stronghold, and have turned aside the continual sacrifice, and appointed the desolating abomination. So, strong ones who come from this figure would appoint the desolating abomination. That's right there. It triangulates right there to everything else that I said. That was the 10th caliph built the Dome of the Rock, the abomination of desolation. This triangulates it right in there. In verse 32, and those acting wickedly against the covenant, he defileth by flatteries, and the people knowing their God are strong and have wrought. And the teachers of the people give understanding to many, and they have stumbled by sword and by flame and by captivity and spoiled days. And in their stumbling they are helped, a little help, and joined to them have been many with flatteries. And some of the teachers do stumble for refining by them, and for purifying, for making white till the end of the time, for it is yet for a time appointed. And here another important verse in verse 36. And a lot of Jews and Christians converted to Islam. They will go to different Jewish or Christian regions or cities and literally force everybody to convert, or they would chop their heads off and enslave them. I mean, that literally happened. So in verse 36, and the king has done according to his will. And that is not a wild claim. That is actually factual. There's a lot of horror stories from history that I could recite, but I'm not going to. So in verse 36, and the king has done according to his will. The same one despicable king that I'm talking about here, right, has done according to his will and has exalted himself. This is what Thessalonians was warning us about with this so-called Antichrist figure. The greatest Antichrist is the one who defines the denial of Jesus as Son of God, who defines the denial of the baptism of the Holy Spirit, which seals you for salvation. It is the definition of the one who denies that Jesus is, the Lord and Savior. It is the one that denies that Jesus even died and resurrected. That is defined by Islam as religion, and that religion was defined by their founding prophet. He is therefore the definition of the Antichrist. Nobody else is or will come close to that, okay? According to the criteria given by Jesus and the Bible by itself. Okay, so it says here, he exalteth himself, just like Paul warned in Thessalonians, and magnifieth himself against every god, and against the God of gods he speaketh wonderful things. So this king here magnifies and exalts himself against every god. Does not mean he makes himself God of gods. It doesn't say that anywhere. It says that he exalts himself against them. What does Islam classically do? It opposes every other deity on the planet, stronger than any other religion is. It is that strongly against any other form of deity. Okay? Perfectly fulfilled with Islam here. So magnifies himself against every god, and against the God of gods he speaketh wonderful things, and has prospered till the indignation has been completed, for that which is determined has been done. And unto the God of his fathers, which were the tribal Babylonian gods, he does not attend, nor to the desires of women, yea, to any god he does not attend, for against all he magnifies himself. What this means is all the other gods that existed on the planet, he did not attend to them. He magnified himself above and over them, They're all false. What does it say he did worship? In verse 38, and to the God of strongholds, who is Allah, on his station he giveth honor. Yea, to a God whom his fathers knew not, on his station, that would be Israel, he giveth honor. Yea, to a God whom his fathers knew not. Nobody knew about Allah. He invented Allah. Nobody knew of Allah before that. He invented the language that named him Allah, the very language itself even, and the religion. Right? So he honors a God whom his fathers knew not. He giveth honor with gold and silver and precious stone and desirable things. 100% true of Islam. And he is dealt in the fortresses of the strongholds with a strange God, whom he has acknowledged. He multiplieth honor, and has caused them to rule over many, and the ground he apportioneth at a price. And lower down, saving some time, and has come into the desirable land, and many do stumble, and these escape from his hand, Edom and Moab, and the chief of the sons of Ammon. And he sendeth forth his hand upon the lands, and the land of Egypt is not for an escape. This is because Islam conquered Egypt until this very day. So that is, again, all of this is 100% true of Islam. Okay, and he ruled over treasures of gold and silver, over all the desirable things of Egypt, and Lubim and Cushim are at his steps. In fact, Cushim represents the rest of Africa. Back then in biblical times, that's what it was. Ethiopia was the ancient term for the rest of Africa. Cushim was interchangeable with Ethiopia, represented anything outside of Egypt or Libya or any of those other places that existed back then. Known to the others outside of there. Right? So it says that he would capture Egypt and Cushim. Well, that historically is true of Islam. Okay? A lot of Africa is Islamic. Egypt is Islamic because of what they did. Okay? In verse 44, and reports trouble him out of the east and out of the north, and he has gone forth in great fury to destroy and to devote many to destruction. He planteth the tents of his palace. I mean, how many kingdoms out there use tents, right? He planteth the tents of his palace between the seas and the holy desirable mountain, and hath come unto his end, and there is no helper to him. So right there, it tells you that the strong ones will come out and build the abomination. Okay, he puts his tents and his palace, two Islamic concepts, between the seas and the holy mountain. Okay, he's occupied Israel. That's the station that he took over, and they built their monument on the Temple Mount. Okay, and it says he is come unto his end, and there is no helper to him. Historically, he was poisoned and died suddenly. After he died, he was the first ruler of Islam. They scrambled to create a kingdom to maintain what he had started. And from there, from his demise, arose the first caliphs of Islam. So it was the 10th ruler who built the Dome of the Rock. So all of this perfectly fulfilled with Islam. So the importance of all this is that when we go to read Revelation 12, we see the following. It's talking about Israel, and it's talking about a timeline. It says, Israel brought forth a male child, Jesus, in verse 5, who's about to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. So we know that this was around 4 BC when Jesus was born. Right? And caught away was her child unto God in his throne, because he died and he ascended. That was around 29 AD. And the woman Israel did flee to the wilderness. This means the exile, where she is a place made ready from God. Now we know that they didn't go into exile before the fall of Israel in 70 AD. So we know that this exile started after 70 AD, which is historically confirmed. So the woman did flee to the wilderness, where she has a place made ready from God, that there they may nourish her days 1,260. Well, there we have the 1,260 days, years again. Now Israel did not go into exile for 3.5 years. They went into exile for nearly 2,000 years. Okay? In fact, they still occupied Israel until the years in the 500s and 600s, until Islam finally took over. So it's fair to say, nope, it does point exactly to what I've been talking about. The 1,260 years would be exactly from the Dome of the Rock, when they gained official control over the holy place, the Temple Mount, marking their signet, instead of God's signet being there, marking the signet of essentially Satan upon it. From that point, 1260. Right there. The woman fled to the wilderness, where she is a place made ready from God, that there they may nourish her days 1,260. Okay? And then lower down, in verse 13, the same thing's repeated. And when the dragon saw that he was cast forth to the earth, he pursued the woman, because we know after Jesus died and ascended, he and Michael cast Satan down. So it's talking about that time period again, around 29 AD or whatever, just after that, some point after that. When the dragon saw that he was cast forth to the earth after the death and resurrection of Jesus, he pursued the woman Israel, who did bring forth the male. And there were given to the woman 2 wings of the great eagle, that she may fly to the wilderness, to her place, where she is nourished 3.5 times. from the face of the serpent. All the same terminologies from up above. So that shows you that 1260, the unit of 1260, is equal to 3.5 times, because it's talking literally verbatim about the same one time period. So 3.5 times equals 1260. We know it's 1260 years, so a time equals 360 years. But what this proves for us is that the 1260-year period was from the Dome of the Rock in 688, and that is the date that Islamic scholars say it was officiated. So from 688 until 1948, the rebirth of Israel. There's not any shred of evidence out there that any Jew or Christian or anybody has presented that will come even close to as monumental as what I've just presented here in this video. This is the absolute biblical proof, okay, that according to the Bible, if the Bible is real and from God, the end must be in 2023. I don't know the day or the hour. I do know that Israel was reborn in the middle of March 1948. Does that suggest possibly that Jesus might come in the middle of March? I don't know. It'll be interesting. Makes me wonder, when was Jesus born? Was Jesus born around that time? But anyways, it's going to be in 2023. And I could almost say that, pretty much say that if it doesn't happen in 2023 or soon enough thereafter, that perhaps the book of Daniel was fraudulent, because the book of Daniel explicitly dictates when the end will be, and it's 2023. That means the rapture is going to be in 2023. Okay? Jesus will come suddenly, like lightning. The heavens will start cascading rocks and such down to the earth, fire and rocks down from the heavens. He will be seen. The sign of Jesus will appear in the heavens. He will arrive like lightning over the earth, sending the armies of the angels out across the earth to gather the chosen. The resurrection will occur. The good will be translated into new bodies. The living who are alive, who pass in judgment, will be translated into new bodies, heavenly perfected bodies, and we'll all be risen up together with Jesus and with the angels to get off of this earth that's being smitten. And we'll go on to a new world to be with Jesus and all our loved ones again. And this is what's going to happen. We'll be going to God's kingdom, the true higher Israel, the true higher Jerusalem, and all of that. Okay, it actually says that the holy city from above will descend to the earth, but let's not overcomplicate things for right now. Okay, the rapture will be next year according to the Bible. We will fly away, like it says. Those 80 years will be cut off hastily, and we will fly away. Okay, the rapture is going to be in 2023. It could even come tonight. Rosh Hashanah just occurred. It's only 2.5 months away from 2023. It wouldn't shock me if it occurred before 2023, from now until then. It also wouldn't shock me if it occurred just after, but it's going to happen in 2023. And Jesus warned all the 7 churches. I don't have time to read it. In each one of the churches, he warned them to reform, or else they'll be caught like a thief. They're caught unawares, because he comes like a thief. And we know from Luke 12, like I said, he says, watch, be ready. If you're watching, then you won't be caught like a thief. If you are not watching, I will come at a day and an hour that you will not expect, and it'll be like I'm a thief turning up to you. Okay? However, if you have an invited guest coming, or planned guest coming from the wedding feast, the bridegroom himself, you know when he's coming, you can let him straight in, just like Jesus said in Luke 12. But if you don't know when he's coming, you have no clue, you're not ready, you're not watching, and he comes, it's going to be all of a sudden, like a thief, and you won't be ready. So everybody's got to get ready. What do you have to do? What did Jesus say you have to do? In all his warnings to the 7 churches, which represent Christianity in the end days, the 7 divisions of Christianity, he's telling them all to reform, commands them literally to reform, or else. That's what we all have to do. Despite what all our silly church doctrines might teach, arguing this and arguing that, who cares about all these little things? At the end of the day, are you good? Right? Who cares about theological disputes? Are you good? That's important too. People have overlooked that. People worried about, oh, I'm theologically correct in everything I believe, but are you good? There'll be good people who aren't correct in everything, but they'll be accepted at judgment. There'll be people who might have everything theologically correct, but are just not worthy because they weren't good enough. So have you reformed? Right? The true baptism is from above. It's from the Holy Spirit. God is holy. God is a spirit. The true baptism is Baptism is when you reform. When you reform, God puts His Holy Spirit upon you, just like with Jesus. If you don't reform, you don't get that. You can go underwater all you want, you're not going to get it. You can only get it from God. You have to be reborn from the waters above. It has to come down from God. He will only do that if you reform, not because you pick out Jesus from a vending machine, not because He wants salvation. He gives it to those who earn it. That's why when the disciples asked Jesus, "Sir, are those saved few?" Jesus said, "Yup. And many shall come to me in that day professing, 'Oh, I heralded you and I knew you.' And I will say to them, 'Begone, I don't know you.'" And they'll say, "Well, we raised the dead, we did miracles." And Jesus will say, "I don't know you. Begone." And He says that the sinners will not enter the kingdom. Murderers, harlots, the effeminate, this and that there, liars and all sorts will not be entering the kingdom. God doesn't make excuses. So you have to reform. Nobody's perfect, but you have to reform. And if you reform and you stop sinning, and that is your personal mandate, your goodness can atone for the mistakes that you make. But if you never reform, you're just accumulating more sins and guilt and making more mistakes, and there's no reformation to break that. When you reform, you're forgiven for all your past sins. You got a clean slate. If you meant it, but you make some mistakes, but you're doing so much good that it covers those mistakes, you can be forgiven. If you keep making mistakes and directly sin in opposition to it, you tarnish the crucifixion of Jesus. You tarnish everything He did for you. You tarnish your own reformation. You essentially spit on your own baptism. People don't even reform. Christian churches don't even teach it. God, Jesus, commanded it to the churches. That's all you need to know. So anyways, folks, get ready, because it's going to be 2023. I've been saying this for 3.5 years so far. It's been on my channel since 2019. I've been saying it for 3.5 years. I even said it before the 3.5 years, as far as like 4, 5, or 6 years ago. I've been saying it and patiently waiting for this time that God told Daniel. Okay? And there's too much evidence to say that it's wrong. Too much evidence. So anyways, folks, God bless you all. Everybody take care.